Hey, this is Peyton.
And Aidan.
And Logan.
And we're going to talk about the difference between World War I and World War II.
So, Aidan, what's the difference between how World War I started and how World War II started?
World War I started with the assassination of the Archduke of Austria, Franz Ferdinand, by a Serbian nationalist near Serbia. Because of this, Austria declared war on Serbia, and since Germany was also friends with Austria, Germany did the same. Serbia was allied with Russia, who declared war on Germany and Austria, and then France was also allied with Russia, so France also declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary, causing the start of World War I. Eventually, Britain later joined after Germany declared war on neutral Belgium to get to France. The way World War II started was a much longer series of events. It started mostly with Hitler becoming the president of Germany and then making it a dictatorship. He declared war on many countries or annexed many countries illegally, and Britain and France used a tactic called appeasement, which was basically just letting him get what he wants. He first annexed Austria, then took part of Czechoslovakia, which was a country that existed back then, but it doesn't exist anymore. Even after this, he invaded Czechoslovakia, and Britain and France did nothing. He took the Czech part and left Slovakia independent, but still under German control with the German government for the German fatherland. He then wanted to invade Poland to regain lost territory and from World War I. He wanted a part of Poland separating Germany into two, and once they denied, he declared war. The Allies, Britain and France, and the Commonwealth, decided that this was the last straw and they declared war. Just note that Stalin, or the USSR, also helped Germany and was a joint invasion where they shared. So basically, World War II started because of World War I.
Now I'm here with Miss Madison. She has some very interesting stuff to say about World War I and World War II.
World War I is also known as the Great War, and it was between the years 1914 and 1918. America joined in 1915, a year after it began, and the reason is Woodrow Wilson was the president, and there were 128 Americans that were killed on a British ship called the Lusitania, and 128 Americans were on that ship and they were killed. Germany, who took credit for bombing that ship, bragged that they could do that to any ship that they wanted to. Once that was said, the United States entered World War I. We spent 7.5 months in battle, and 116,000 Americans were killed. 204,000 Americans were wounded. World War I was the first time that chemical weapons were used, and this was like mustard gas, chlorine gas, things that would do terrible damage to people's lungs. It was also a time when they first used barbed wire as a weapon. They would line trenches and people would have to crawl over barbed wire. They used artillery guns. Some of the deadliest weapons were actually used in World War I. The Germans had a tank called the Big Bertha, and this tank could shoot a 2,000-pound projectile, and it would penetrate a concrete wall that would be 40 feet deep. The Germans also had something called a triplane, which had 3 wings. They had machine guns, tanks, they had zeppelins, and it was the first time that they were actually using trenches, which caused a lot of diseases, something called trench foot. And this is where the soldiers would be in these wet, cold trenches so long that their feet would begin to rot. President Woodrow Wilson, as I said earlier, was the president at the time. The war actually ended in 1918 with the Treaty of Versailles. And once the Treaty of Versailles was signed, this marked the end of World War I. In total, 8 million soldiers worldwide died. 21 years later, we enter another war, World War II, the Second World War. And this began in 1939 and lasted through 1945. 64 million deaths worldwide make World War II the bloodiest conflict. The Battle of the Bulge was the largest and deadliest battle for the U.S. troops. At the Battle of the Bulge, 80,000 American soldiers were killed. Some of the weapons that were used in World War II were machine guns, tanks, mines. For the first time, they had parachute units. There were submachine guns, grenades, flamethrowers, and for the first time, the nuclear bomb was used. The president at the time was FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt died at the end of his second term, and his vice president, Harry Truman, became president. He realized that this war had gone on so long, and they did not see an end to it, and so the nuclear bomb was dropped in 2 places in Japan. Once this happened, the war ended.
World War II started because of World War I, and that was one of the many effects of World War I. World War I also started many other wars, such as the Turkish War for Independence and a couple of others. World War II caused many other things, including the European Union, the United Nations, and also a lot of other wars, including the Greek Civil War, the Korean Civil War, and Vietnamese Civil War, and many other civil wars usually started by communism and democracy fighting. So what were the differences between World War I and World War II? Well, World War I started basically by itself and had no really other connotation from any other war. World War II started mostly because of World War I. So they started completely differently, and also they had completely different countries fighting in them, with the only same countries fighting with the same government were none of them except for America. So it really doesn't matter which war is more devastating. World War I definitely made more countries completely disappear, as 3 empires, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and Russian Empire, completely vanished. World War II also could have had comparably disastrous consequences because it started the Cold War, which had more casualties in total with all the proxy wars started than World War I. Some of the countries that fought in World War I were on the Entente side were Russia, Japan, Britain, Portugal, France, Italy, and America. Some of the countries that fought in the Central Powers were Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. The countries that fought in World War II on the Allies were Britain, France, the Soviet Union, China, all the Commonwealth countries, and America. The countries that fought in the Axis were Germany, Japan, Italy, and many other smaller countries that Germany tried to get to sign, like Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania, and some others. Italy and Romania also switched sides near the end of the war and fought against Germany. And those are all the countries that fought in the Axis in World War II.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. I'm Logan.
I'm Aidan.
And I'm Peyton.
See you next time.